Joining us now for further analysis on this moment is Adam Guillette. He's the president of the media watchdog group, Accuracy in Media. So, Adam, I want to start with the coronavirus, actually, because today we saw a major development, the coronavirus being shipped out to frontline workers, vulnerable populations as well. It's really a miraculous achievement within itself. And you and I have talked about this before, but there was a time where it was taboo to support a vaccine this early. There was a time where many of those in the media, even some politicians, were saying that they wouldn't trust the vaccine if it came out this early. Do you fear that there's some damage that was done by those type of remarks?
Unquestionably, we saw the numbers in a Pew Research survey where support or the amount of people who said they would feel comfortable taking the vaccine dropped dramatically. I think it went down something like 25%. And that was after the New York Times ran articles critical of the vaccine that turned out to be clickbait. That was after Andrew Cuomo claimed he didn't trust the vaccine. He needed to have his experts look at the vaccine. They literally are putting politics ahead of human life.
And that's a shame, too, because you and I have talked about this. Sometimes it's not a political type of issue, even though it's portrayed as that. For example, when we're talking about the prospect of a vaccine, that is something that is unbelievably miraculous. The fact that it's going to save probably hundreds of thousands of lives because it was expedited so quickly, because of Operation Warp Speed. It's just a good story where science really prevailed at the end of the day. But it's not the first time where there's been hypocrisy allegations when it comes to this issue. So do you fear that in the event, for example, that the Biden administration were to take over, as they seem poised to be after today's vote, but do you fear that they just won't be pressed the same way that perhaps the Trump administration was over the past 4 years?
Well, they're going to be treated like your grandmother treated you on Thanksgiving with a hug and a kiss. The treatment that Biden's going to get from the media is going to be unbelievable compared to what we saw Trump get. Now, that may change if the progressives turn on him, if they're trying to get crazy radical left-wing legislation done and Biden is standing in their way, the media will turn on him just like that. But at least initially, he's going to be treated like a conquering hero as if he cured the coronavirus himself. And that's why these folks in the media must be exposed.
And I think you bring up several great points. And on your website, actually, I noticed this, that you were covering something that I haven't seen covered very many other places. And it's the fact that the New York Times, up to at least last night when I was reading about it on your website, they have not addressed the Eric Swalwell allegations when it comes to a Chinese spy possibly infiltrating not only his campaign, but his inner circle as well. Has that changed since you published that article? And does that say something more larger about this moment?
No, not to my knowledge, it hasn't. And our accuracy and media activists have now sent thousands of emails to the New York Times editorial board and key editors. This is a Democrat congressman who made his name by getting on CNN, getting on the New York Times, and talking about the Russia collusion story. And it turns out he was potentially colluding with an alleged Chinese spy. He's photographed with her. Supposedly, she recommended staffers for him to hire a Chinese spy. CNN has covered this story. All kinds of mainstream news outlets have covered this story. But the paper of record, where it's all the news that's fit to print, the New York Times refuses to cover this story. We need to press them and find out why and expose their outrageous bias.
And could you imagine if the shoe was on the other foot, for example? I mean, we spent 4 years talking about the prospect of a member of the Trump campaign meeting with a Russian official and how that would spark this long investigation, things of that nature. And here we have an example where there is quite literally someone who is photographed with the subject in question, who is now verified to be a Chinese spy. It's just something that is pretty remarkable no matter where you stand on the political spectrum. But I do want to point out something else that I saw on your website last night. I thought it was very interesting. The dean of the University of Columbia School of Journalism said this quote, and I want to read it directly. He said, "Those of us in journalism have to come to terms with the fact free speech, a principle that we hold sacred, is being weaponized against the principles of journalism." What did he mean by this?
You know exactly what he meant. These folks were for free speech when it was for them to take on the administration. These are the people who wanted to question authority until they became the authority. Now they're opposed to free speech because they don't want to be questioned by you and I. They don't want to be questioned by activists. They don't want anything from us except endless federal funding. They're a private institution that gets tons of our cash, and they're literally using your money to speak out against free speech and to teach the next generation of journalists to oppose free speech. That's why we act against them. We set up these action alerts on our site where you can send one message and it goes to a whole bunch of key staff at Columbia University. These folks need to be exposed.
Yeah, I mean, they're quite literally the people who are creating the future for our children, the people who are supposed to be training the next generation of journalists, for example, to hold power to account. But it seems like nowadays that's not necessarily what the industry is. And in my opinion, it's coming to the detriment of not only the news industry, but the American people who we're supposed to be supporting. And I think that's where it really becomes problematic. But Adam Guillette, as always, it's a pleasure having you on this program. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.